Hello, I'm Soroka with continuing coverage of the Israeli-Iranian conflict coming up in the next 60 minutes. Israel's main hospital in the south sustains severe damage after Iran launches a new wave of strikes across the country. Israel launches another series of strikes across Iran, including on sites linked to its nuclear program. Iran's foreign minister confirms he will meet with his counterparts in the E3, the UK, France and Germany, in Geneva on Friday.
I have ideas as to what to do, but I haven't made a final. I like to make the final decision 1 second before it's due, because things change.
President Trump says he hasn't made a final decision on whether the US will join Israeli offensive on Iran. And with airstrikes raining down and spreading fear across the country, we look at how the people of Iran are dealing with life under bombardment. Iran has carried out another series of airstrikes across Israel, firing at least 30 missiles early on Thursday, and that's according to Israeli authorities. Now, the missiles struck Tel Aviv, hitting a business district and residential areas. And in Beersheba, the biggest hospital in southern Israel, was badly damaged. Patients and staff were lightly wounded, and that's according to the Director General of the hospital. Now, the Iranian military says the Soroka hospital is next to an Israeli military headquarters, and the strike targeted that building. Tel Aviv and other locations were also hit by what Israel says was a barrage of more than 30 missiles.
The northern surgical building was hit directly by a rocket. As a result of this hit, fire broke out in this building. Several wards were completely demolished, and there is extensive damage across the entire hospital, with damage to buildings, structures, windows, ceilings across the medical center. We have 40 injured people from people who were in the hospital at the time. The vast majority of these staff and patients are lightly wounded from broken glass, falling ceilings, and other effects. They were all treated in our emergency department.
Right, well, in a moment, we'll be live in Tehran with Tahir Saadi. But first, let's go to Noor Auda, who's in Amman, and she's there because the Israeli government has banned Al Jazeera from reporting inside of Israel and also the occupied territories. Noor, clearly the damage in Israel is extensive in this latest strike in several areas. Also, some reports saying that the most intense so far. So in that case, what's the situation on the ground and where are we with the number of casualties?
Well, let's start with the number of casualties. It's been updated by the Magen David services to 76. In all, 137 are counted as having been injured or suffering from panic attacks during this latest barrage early on Thursday morning. 6 people are in critical condition. In Tel Aviv, near the stock exchange building, the buildings are being cordoned off because there's fear of falling debris. Holon, where a building has collapsed because of the direct impact, there is extensive damage. But also a lot of damage reported at Soroka hospital, a major hospital in southern Israel, where there was a missile that struck near that medical compound. And of course, this has invited the outrage and the indignation of Israeli officials who decried Iran targeting the hospital and said only monsters would do that.
Noor, a direct hit on a hospital in southern Israel, one of the largest. How much damage is there with this situation? And a prompt response we heard from Israel. What's their reaction been?
Well, no casualties reported, so nobody was killed from that impact of that missile. But because of the extensive damage, some patients have been evacuated to other hospitals. Now, of course, we know Israel has been repeatedly attacking hospitals, even assassinating journalists and officials inside the hospitals. But nonetheless, because of this attack, which has been, the pictures of which has been cleared by the military censor, we're hearing a lot from Israeli officials, including most recently from the Israeli Minister of Defense, Israel Katz, who is talking about assassinating the supreme leader in Iran. And he said that this man must not stay alive. He is the one who orders the attacks, and so he must be taken out. We also heard from the Israeli president talking about the same thing, that the head of the snake, as he put it, must be taken out. The Israeli prime minister has said that Iran will pay a heavy price. All of them, of course, focusing on that, on the damage in Soroka, accusing Iran of directly targeting the hospital and ignoring reports that there are sensitive areas right next to or adjacent to the hospital compound.
Okay, thank you for that update from Noor Aldo there in Amman in Jordan. Now, Israel's military has carried out attacks on a number of military targets and sites connected with Iran's nuclear program. It struck Iran's main enrichment facility in Natanz and hit targets close to Iran's heavy water facility at Kondam. Iran calls it a renewed violation of international law. Its atomic agency says there were no casualties and no risk to the area's residents. Let's bring in Tahed Asadi, who's live for us in the Iranian capital. Tahed, about the strikes against sites linked to the nuclear program. Tell us more.
Well, we've got this statement coming out from the Atomic Energy Organization of the country saying that Kondab, which is a facility for heavy water complex and a research reactor has been targeted today. Also, they said that they have reported about this recent strike to the IAEA, but it seems that there is a strong tone of criticism in this statement, saying that so far we have seen inaction from this international body. While we see that over the past few days, different Iranian nuclear facilities have been targeted by different strikes of the Israeli let's say, forces. And also we have to keep in mind that it's not just limited to nuclear facilities, as we see the continuation of these attacks to different parts across the country, which includes indeed the military facilities as well as the civilian infrastructures and the residential buildings, living casualties, civilian casualties indeed. And several women and children have been reported to be killed, and we have been at different scenes of these strikes, seeing by our own eyes that bodies of women and children are being taken out of these scenes.
And Tahed, Israel's foreign minister is heading to Geneva for a meeting with the E3 tomorrow. That's the UK, Germany and France. Do we have any insights into what we can expect?
Yeah, Iran's foreign minister Abbas Araghchi just confirmed to IRNA, the state news agency, that he will be in Geneva tomorrow on Friday to hold talks with European countries, 3 European countries of France, Germany, and the United Kingdom. And on that, it was the spokesperson of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ismail Baghai, with a statement about the purpose of this trip. He said that he's going to hold talks with the representative of EU for Foreign Affairs, and also he said that the topics on the agenda will include actually the nuclear program of the country and lifting of the sanctions. But still, it goes without saying that under this circumstance, the recent developments following the Israeli strikes on Iranian military and nuclear facilities is going to be an important topic on the table of negotiations. Also, we had this from the Iranian spokesperson that this meeting is being held at request of the European side, but at all events, it seems that Iran tries to give out this message that it is still into the trajectory of diplomatic solutions for this already complicated, intricate situation in which it's located. And also we have to keep in mind that on last Sunday, we were expecting a 6th round of indirect talks between Iran and the United States. And now Tehran is saying that that meeting is indicative of the very fact that Iran was still interested in following up the diplomatic trajectory, regardless of the very fact that we've got the adoption of a resolution by the Board of Governors of IAEA, and a day after that adoption, Israeli strikes began. So the message that it's trying to send out is a continuation of diplomatic affairs to solve the problem, but it's still, we've got this point from Iranian Supreme Leader, President, and other officials that under this circumstance, speaking to the United States, while it supports the Israelis during these strikes, is not going to be an option on the table as long as the Israeli strikes continue.
Okay, thank you very much, Tohed Al-Sadi there in Iran. Well, as we've been reporting, Israel struck in Kondab near to a research reactor heavy water facility. Heavy water, or deuterium oxide, is chemically similar to regular water, but with hydrogen atoms replaced by deuterium. That's a stable, non-radioactive form of hydrogen. It's used in some nuclear reactors to slow down neutrons and aid cooling, allowing the use of natural uranium rather than enriched. While essential for peaceful nuclear energy, heavy water can also be used to produce weapons-grade plutonium. That's raising concerns over nuclear proliferation, especially as hostilities are intensifying between Israel and Iran. Right, let's speak to Mr. Robert Cayley, as a distinguished fellow with Stockholm International Peace Research Institute and a former chief nuclear inspector in Iraq, joining us live now from Vienna. Thank you very much for your time. What everyone really wants to know, those that are sitting at home in the region or worldwide, are we any closer to a nuclear disaster? And if that's the case, what effects will that have on the facilities there, the area, the population, the environment, and even the region as a whole?
Thank you, Sarah, for asking me. There is no danger to people in the region whatsoever. Heavy water, for example, is a total joke. There's no reason to even talk about it because it could only be used in a reactor designed for heavy water, and they don't have the reactor. So this is just a sideshow. It's just a sideshow. The important thing is the centrifuge program. The centrifuge program runs on uranium hexafluoride, which is a compound that is chemically reactive. You wouldn't want to try to breathe it or the products of it and other dusty materials that it produces. That is of no danger to people outside the immediate area of a bombing. You're more likely to be killed by the bomb than you are by something from the uranium itself. It poses no danger whatsoever to people outside a few kilometers from each one of these plants. Chemical and radiologic hazards are quite small. The one counter to this is Bushehr, which is a major power plant, nuclear power plant. If someone were to attack that plant, you would expect that the worst case would be something like Fukushima. There could be releases of material in the immediate region as well, but it's well contained inside a large concrete dome. And Israel has shown a great deal of reluctance to attack operating nuclear power plants in past years, such as in Syria or Iraq. Israel's not going to attack Bushehr. That would completely destroy their.
But Mr. Robert Cayley, if Israel manages to convince the US President Donald Trump or the administration to join, and that's what it wants, to be able to hit Fardel nuclear plant, then the situation could potentially be grave.
Well, it depends on what you're talking about. And Bushehr is a totally different thing, so let's leave it aside. They're not going to hit Bushehr. If they do bomb Fordo, I think it would bring the U.S. into the war. I was the last chief inspector for nuclear in Iraq. We told people what was going on in Iraq, and people wanted to bomb. So they didn't pay any attention to what we told them was the truth. If the U.S. joins in, it's going to be a problem. But if they do bomb Fordo, the best of all possible things is the uranium is deep underground. And if you bomb the mountain and the mountain collapses on it, end of problem, end of hazard. It's all buried deep in the earth.
So Iran's nuclear future, what options does it have looking forward, do you think?
They have a very important option besides letting the U.S. bomb them. They need, with the U.S., to start downblending that 60% material that they have produced. They produce that material for no real purpose other than provocation and a hedge, and it's time for the hedge. They downgrade that material back to 20%, and the U.S. gives them something in return, removes some sanctions. And then once they've gotten rid of the 60% material, which is the burr under the saddle, then they remove the 20% material down to 3%. And you do this in steps. And the important thing is to do it in steps, not ask to get to the end point in one big deal.
Mr. Keeley, the head of the IAEA spoke to Al Jazeera and says that it's constantly monitoring the activity. It's in touch with the Iranian authorities, albeit limited. They, at the moment, say there's no concern. But in your experience and decades of research, what can you tell us about the nuclear activity of Iran? And has it stayed the same over the years, or has that changed? Because the IAEA is saying that Iran hasn't, at the moment, got the nuclear weapons.
Well, the IAEA doesn't have the competence or the information to know if they have the weapon. The IAEA is an auditing organization that counts drums of nuclear material, full stop. They don't know anything about weapons, so leave them out of this. What is important is this program for centrifuges is the child of the Iran-Iraq war. This started back in like 1990. And at that time, it was clearly designed to support a weapons program. But that program pretty well disappeared by 2003 for a whole number of reasons. The CIA says that, and I agree with the CIA, that they haven't shown an interest in weaponizing the material into a bomb since that time. They've spent the last 22 years not building a bomb. And so pushing them into a corner and saying, you were going to build a bomb, you're going to build a bomb, might at some point convince them that they should have built the bomb in the first place.
So, Mr. Kelly, what do you know about Israel's capabilities? Because it does seem to be also a nuclear country.
Oh, goodness. Israel is widely suspected. I mean, it's kind of a joke that they have about 100 nuclear weapons. They made it Dimona in the southern part of the country, and you can find all of this information on the internet. There was even a defector who came out of their facility taking pictures of the bombs, parts that they were making and all. This has been known for 40 or 50 years. They have a large nuclear program.
OK, thank you very much, Mr. Robert Cayley, a distinguished fellow with Stockholm International Peace Research Institute. Right, well, US President Donald Trump says he's still weighing his options on US military intervention. Earlier, Trump said his patience with Iran has already run out. Our White House correspondent Kimberly Halkett reports from Washington, D.C.
It's a decision still yet to be made, whether to deploy the U.S. military to halt Iran's nuclear programs.
You don't know. I may do it. I may not do it. I mean, nobody knows what I'm going to do. I can tell you this, that Iran's got a lot of trouble, and they want to negotiate.
The Iranians deny that. The permanent mission of Iran to the UN refuting on X. No Iranian official has ever asked to grovel at the gates of the White House. Iran does not negotiate under duress, shall not accept peace under duress. Iran shall respond to any threat with a counter-threat and to any action with reciprocal measures. Trump admits he's lost patience for negotiations.
I said it's very late to be talking. We may meet. I don't know. There's a big difference between now and a week ago, right? Maybe you could call it the ultimate ultimatum, right?
The U.S. is shifting aircraft and warships to the region. To date, it insists military involvement has been limited to defending Israel from Iran's missile attacks. But if it's to destroy Iran's deeply buried Fordo nuclear plant, Israel needs America's so-called bunker buster bombs. That's why it's urging the U.S. to join its offensive campaign. Deliberations over the Israel-Iran conflict have divided Trump's supporters, including conservative personality Tucker Carlson, who previously campaigned for Trump.
You're not going to convince me that the Iranian people are my enemy.
But the U.S. president insists he's not considering a prolonged foreign entanglement.
The next week is going to be very big, maybe less than a week, maybe less.
U.S. intelligence suggests Iran is years away from making a nuclear weapon. But this week, President Trump said he believes Iran was close and has rejected that intelligence assessment. Kimberly Helkett, Al Jazeera, the White House.
Right, Adel Abdel Jafar is the director of the Foreign Policy Programme at the Middle East Council on Global Affairs. Thank you for joining Al Jazeera here in the studio. Well, we've just seen we've heard from Trump, but we also know that UK Foreign Secretary David Lammy is in Washington today. He then will be joining a meeting with the E3 countries, France, Germany, the UK. And also present will be the Iranian foreign minister. What do you think is going to come out of that meeting?
I think the European countries and the UK are working to try and de-escalate the situation. If you recall, the first JCPOA, the UK and the E3 were a big part of it and were backing signatories until President Trump withdrew from it. So I think from a European perspective, there is a push to attempt to de-escalate the situation and perhaps persuade that President Trump not to go ahead and attack Iran. Another interesting component in all of this is actually the Diego Garcia base, which is a UK base that the US also has access to, where potentially the B-2 bombers may leave and attack Iran as well. So this would put the UK in a tight situation if its military facility is used as a staging ground for the attack. So I think from a UK perspective, there's an attempt to de-escalate.
Do you think it's enough to convince the US president at the moment, given that he's saying that next week is going to be a big one and keeping it very cryptic?
Well, I think there's strategic ambiguity. This is what Trump is trying to do. He's trying to give the Israelis more time to achieve their mission, B, put more pressure on the Iranians. And there's a debate between the White House advisors. You know, some of them are anti-war, MAGA, US-focused, who are against any foreign entanglement. This is how Donald Trump was actually elected, yeah? And there are the Iran hawks, there are the pro-Israel voices, the AIPAC-funded folks and so on, that are really going for this war. So I don't think he has made up his mind, but is listening to these two competing arguments while he does make up his mind.
Going back to Europe, yesterday the German Chancellor was saying that Israel is effectively doing the dirty work for the rest of the world, which is something that some of those that believe that Iran could have nuclear weapons very soon, that it's doing the job for them. It's sort of contradictory when you also have them saying that they want to de-escalate the situation. So it's still not really clear whether they are for or against this.
Well, I think the German position in particular is sensitive given the historical context that under Nazi Germany, they tried to exterminate all of the Jews. So there's an element of owing something to Israel and allowing it to really engage in this genocide in Gaza and supporting it to the hilt when it comes to Iran as well. So I think in the German context, this is what's at play here.
I just want to turn the focus at the moment to this latest Iranian attack on Israel. It seems to be the largest so far. 30 missiles is what's believed to have been fired, but has hit at least 4 locations that we know of. Could this ratchet up what happens next? Because Israel is clearly saying that hitting a hospital is a red line here for them.
Yeah, this definitely, but we're not going into war. The countries are effectively at war that Israel started with its bombardment of Iran. Israel has more advanced weaponry, can fly the jets, has more precision ammunition and so on. The Iranians have these long-range ballistic missiles that can fire and target military areas, but also are not as precise. So I think there's going to be more of an escalation and a tit for tat. And I think the Iranians may be setting down for the long haul. If you recall, the Iran-Iraq war was for 8 years.
Yeah, incredibly long time.
Exactly. But who says that the Israelis are there for the long haul? You know, this current generation of Israelis has known relative peace. This is the first time that war comes to their cities, Tel Aviv and all of these images and the various cities and so on. There's been a high rise in calls to mental health hotlines, PTSD, depression, anxiety. This is all since October 7th. So again, there's lots of pressure on Israel as a society as it engages in this conflict, as the country engages in this conflict with Iran.
And not to mention the amount of damage that it's causing the economy. Now, is the latest attack enough to convince Israel that they can put pressure on the US to be involved? Because clearly that's the last missing part of the puzzle for Israel.
It is, but if Donald Trump does not join this attack, then there could be a potential off-ramp for Netanyahu to go to his constituency and say, we've attacked the Iranians, we've degraded their capabilities, the Iranians have agreed not to enrich. So there is an off-ramp for the Israelis, but ultimately, of course, the aim here is to bring in the US and attack using the B-2 bombers to attack the Fordow and the remaining facilities. But actually, if that happens, then the Iranians would have to respond by attacking US facilities in the region, including in Arak, including the naval base in Bahrain, as well as US troops in Kuwait. You know, these ballistic missiles go at Mach 5 speed to get to Tel Aviv for 12 minutes. If they get fired in the Gulf, it takes 2 minutes, and this is going to be potentially disastrous for the region.
Okay, thank you very much for your thoughts, Mr. Abdel Ghaffar.
Thank you.
Right, well, Israel says it has no intention of targeting civilians in Iran, but officially at least 224 people have been killed since hostilities started. More than 90% of them were civilians. Behedad Mahichi reports on life under bombardment.
There's panic in the heart of Tehran, and no indication of when the next airstrike will come. In the middle of the night, a father searches for his daughter in their destroyed apartment. Not far away, emergency crews pull out bodies from the rubble. In the daytime, the sky offers no answers, only more airstrikes with no particular pattern. People here have not seen attacks like this since the war with Iraq in the 1980s. Israel says it's targeting Iran's top military leadership, but most of those killed have been civilians, according to Iran's health ministry.
A woman was killed over there. Her arm was severed in the blast. In this other house, a child was killed along with her parents. And in the unit next to it, about 6 people were killed. 3 of them were children.
Among those killed in the recent attacks, a young Taekwondo prodigy, a graphic designer, and a university student. 23-year-old Parnia Abbasi was an English teacher and a poet. In her final poem, before being killed, she wrote, "In 1,000 places I come to an end. I burn. I become a faded star that turns to smoke in your sky." The situation is unpredictable. Petrol stations are clogged as cars fill highways leading out of Tehran. The US president says everyone should evacuate the capital, but for a city of 10 million people, the call is not even close to realistic. Despite the hostilities, life has not stopped yet. A couple got married the day after attacks began, writing on social media, "We endured a hellish night and got married with puffy eyes." For many, life goes on. Tense, disrupted, but unbroken. Behedad Mahichi, Al Jazeera.
Right, well, still ahead on Al Jazeera.
We did not find in Iran elements to indicate that there is an active, systematic plan to build a nuclear weapon.
The head of the UN Atomic Agency tells Al Jazeera there's no evidence that Tehran was building a nuclear weapon, while in the United States,
The hottest part of Europe yesterday, probably today, was Iberia, particularly Spain, southwest Spain, up in the low 40s. And that's starting to generate showers, which I think will eventually spread slowly inland. But typically, most of Europe actually is hotter than it should be. 1 or 2 places approaching record values. The difference is Scandinavia and Eastern Europe, where this northerly breeze keeps picking up and dropping temperatures and bringing rain in. I mean, look at what's happening in Vilnius, down to 14, for example, on Friday. But that's atypical. If you pick up Kyiv, which is to the south, of course, it gets down to 17 degrees on Friday, then rises to 21 as the breeze dies down, despite 1 or 2 showers by Sunday. But Paris represents the hot part of Europe and getting hotter. with a record in June, as far as I know, of 37.6. The forecast is at least at that level on Sunday, so you might be breaking a record. France is not alone, it's just one I am picking out of Western Europe as being really quite hot. The hot and dusty weather is obvious in North Africa, you expect that, but there are now starting to be clumps of thunderstorms that run slowly westwards through Mali, in this case, filling up the River Niger. The seasonal rains are maybe a little bit further south than that, but these globs we should watch because eventually they sometimes turn into hurricanes.
Ever wondered what a fairy tale sunrise looks like? Welcome to Uzbekistan, the land of 1,001 sunrises, where each dawn is like never before, where ancient palaces bathe in the golden morning hues. A journey that takes you to the most beautiful scenes. Live the adventure. And remember, make a wish on the many shooting stars that await. Uzbekistan, explore the magic.
The second episode of this series explores the rise of the major drug cartels and their reign of terror in the 1970s.
The Mexican government literally told the traffickers, we have to produce the body, because they knew he was dead.
America's public enemy #1 is drug abuse.
And the launch of the international war on drugs, drug trafficking, politics and power, the age of drug lords on Al Jazeera.
Welcome back. You're watching Al Jazeera, and here's a reminder of our top stories this hour. The biggest hospital in southern Israel has been badly damaged in an Iranian missile attack. The Iranian military says it was targeting the headquarters of Israeli forces close to the Soroka hospital in Beersheba. Tel Aviv and other locations were also struck, but by what Israel says was more than 30 missiles. Earlier, Israel carried out a series of attacks on Iran. Strikes hit several targets in the capital, as well as the country's nuclear research facility in Natanz and the Arak heavy water reactor. US President Donald Trump says his patience with Iran has already run out, but he declined to say whether the US military would intervene in the conflict between Israel and Iran, saying only that a decision would be taken at the last moment. Now, the head of the UN's Atomic Agency has told Al Jazeera that the IAEA didn't find evidence that Iran was constructing a nuclear weapon. Rafael Grossi's comments comes a week after the agency accused Tehran of not complying with its nuclear obligations. Now, he spoke to my colleague Niamh Barker on Talk to Al Jazeera.
We did not find in Iran elements to indicate that there is an active, systematic plan to build a nuclear weapon. We have not seen elements to allow us as inspectors to affirm that there was a nuclear weapon that was being manufactured or produced somewhere in Iran.
Iranian authorities also claim that scientists were assassinated after the identities were shared with the IAEA. Can you confirm if any IAEA reports were ever leaked, intentionally or otherwise, to states that may use them to kill, to assassinate? These claims made by Iran.
Absolutely not. How can you imagine? And by the way, we don't have information about addresses, people's lives. Absolutely not. So this is something that I would expect serious press not to peddle.
Those are the allegations made by Iran that I'm duty-bound in this interview to put to you. But I hope you appreciate that in a region that where the shadow of the US invasion of Iraq in 2003 still casts a very long shadow, doesn't it? We have to make sure that we have to make sure that any of the intelligence that you may have based your findings on is watertight, which is precisely what we're doing here.
Right, well, international scrutiny has focused on Iran's nuclear ambitions. Analysts say the only country in the Middle East widely believed to have nuclear weapons is Israel. Alan Fisher reports on what's described as Israel's open secret.
While Benjamin Netanyahu has warned of the alleged nuclear threat from others,
Iran has another secret facility in Tehran, a secret atomic warehouse.
One of the worst kept secrets in the world is Israel's own nuclear program. It has never been officially acknowledged, although whistleblowers like Israeli scientist Mordechai Vanunu revealed it is the only country in the Middle East with a nuclear bomb.
Because the only state to have atomic bomb is Israel.
That ambiguity gives Israel a kind of quiet diplomatic leverage. So even without ever confirming its arsenal, the widespread assumption that Israel has nuclear weapons adds weight to how it's perceived on the world stage.
It's now believed Israel has 90 nuclear warheads and the ability to build almost 300 more. During the war in the Middle East in 1973, the US shipped massive conventional military support to Israel rather than have it resort to its nuclear arsenal. Support that continues today, with $3 billion in military aid annually from the US. But the threat from nuclear weapons hasn't gone away.
It hangs over the entire world. There's no question about it. You know, and in the end, I would hope that the U.S. has veto power over what Israel does, and that there are back channels saying, no, you are not going to do this.
Israel's defence minister says Tehran will burn if Iran continues to fire missiles into his country. A declaration, says Steinbach, really aimed at Washington.
This is not so much a warning to Iran, but as a signal to the United States that if the United States does not get actively involved on Israel's side, then it will use nuclear weapons.
There's a strong perception, especially among states in the global south and others in the Middle East, that there is a double standard at play. Countries like Iran, for instance, are under intense international scrutiny, bound by inspections and treaty obligations, while Israel is widely understood to have nuclear weapons and faces very little pressure to disarm, let alone even acknowledge them.
Israel's nuclear weapons policy is called strategic ambiguity, never acknowledging they have them, staying outside international constraints, but leveraging the power they bring, because everyone knows they do. Alan Fisher, Al Jazeera.
Right, well, Akiva Eldar is an Israeli political analyst and he joins us live from Tel Aviv. Does Israel have nuclear weapons, do you think? And what are they doing? Are they hiding them?
Well, Israel is looking at Washington, at a whimsical president who changes his mind and offers new statements, contradicting statements every minute. What Israel is waiting, when I'm talking about Israel, I'm not talking about myself. I'm talking about Prime Minister Netanyahu. He is really hoping that the United States will complete the job and remove all the nuclear facilities and what have you, the centrifuges from Fordow. He will, of course, take the credit twice. First of all, that he was the Israeli president who has saved Israel from another Holocaust, because as he repeats, and his ministers, they use this rhetoric that Ahmadinejad was Hitler, and now all the leadership of the Iranian leadership are Nazis. They don't talk about Israelis being killed in the attacks. The Israelis are being murdered. This is the same language that we used in the Holocaust. And on the other hand, he will brag about being the best friend of the strongest man in the world. And the byproducts, of course, are not of less importance, such as, putting on hold his trial, making people forget what's happening in Gaza, the human catastrophe, as well as the fate of 52 Israelis that are dying in the tunnels in Gaza. Sarah?
And the head of the UN Atomic Agency, you just heard earlier, just before you, telling Al Jazeera there's no evidence that Tehran was building a nuclear weapon. So how is Israel managing to convince its public, or even trying to convince the US, that that's not the case?
Yeah. First of all, I was watching now the same footage, And I was thinking, well, the Iranians could, and I saw the Israeli Minister of Defense saying that, the Iranians are planning to destroy Israel, to put an end to the Zionist idea movement. And I was thinking, the Iranians could do one small thing. Just say, we don't have any intention to destroy Israel. We want to make peace. Actually, Iran did not vote against the Arab Peace Initiative that was initiated by the Arab League and the Muslim organization. But to your question, Sarah, the Israeli media is telling the viewers, as well as the mainstream newspapers, don't believe them. Believe Netanyahu. Believe Channel 14, the propaganda that says that Iranians are bluffing, and the IAEA are participating with the bluff, and we don't believe the inspectors, and we don't believe the statements that are coming out from the IAEA. So it's more now a kind of psychological war or media war. It doesn't really, facts don't matter so much. What matters is what the government wants us to believe. And they want us to believe that Iran, and as I said, that Iran was planning to destroy Israel. That's the reason that, the Iranians said, we don't want, actually, it's not in accordance with our spiritual leaders' messages. We want to have nuclear weapons, but we will not give up the capability. And as you mentioned before, why Israel, Pakistan, India, South Korea have the bomb, and they are not members of the NPT. Israel is also not a member of the NPT, and still they keep the so-called capacity policy with the support of the international community. And Israel, unlike Iran, by the way, has always refused to be part of an agreement of Middle East free of mass destruction weapons, and first and foremost, nuclear weapons. And Israel can do it because it has the support of the United States. All the American administrations, Democrats and Republicans, has approved this so-called opacity policy.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Akiva Elder, an Israeli political analyst in Tel Aviv.
Thank you, Sarah.
President Vladimir Putin says that Russia has been in touch with Israel about its workers in Iran. Putin acknowledged that over 200 Russians are working at the Bushehr nuclear power plant in southern Israel. And he said that Israel had agreed to ensure their safety. Now, he called for an end to the fighting, and he also said Russia would be ready to continue its work on nuclear energy with Iran while guaranteeing Israel's security.
All these details have been discussed with both the Israeli and American sides, and we've sent signals to our Iranian friends. Overall, it is possible to ensure Iran's interests in the field of peaceful nuclear energy. At the same time, it's possible to address Israel's concerns regarding its security. In my opinion, such options exist.
Right, well, Yulia Shapovalova is in St. Petersburg for us. Yulia, Russia's President Vladimir Putin has come off the phone with China's Xi Jinping. What was the outcome of that conversation?
Absolutely right. So Vladimir Putin, well, actually, the phone talk between the leaders of Russia and China was mainly devoted to the situation in the Middle East. Both leaders have strongly condemned Israel's attacks and actions against Iran. Both have identical approach to the issue. According to both leaders, Israel's actions violate the UN Charter, and also Moscow and Beijing highlighted that the settlement of the situation in the Middle East cannot be resolved by force. So basically, in this conversation with Xi Jinping, Putin confirmed Russia's readiness to carry out mediation efforts on Iran. Russia, like any other country, is very much concerned about the deepening escalation in the whole region. On the one hand, there are 1.5 million Russian-speaking Israeli citizens, people of Soviet and Russian origin, living in Israel right now. So Russia has a certain amount of concern about those people. On the other hand, Russia immediately condemned Israeli attacks on Iran, and it says that Iran has its right for self-defense.
And Julia, what concerns do you think Russia has with Israel's attacks against its traditional ally, Iran?
Well, indeed, Russia is Iran's strategic partner and ally, and back in January this year, the two countries signed a comprehensive strategic partnership agreement, and this agreement doesn't oblige the two countries to offer direct military assistance. It does not commit either country to military involvement in the event of an aggression. This treaty commits both nations to refrain from aiding the aggressor, and we've just spoken about the Iranian-Israeli conflict with Deputy Foreign Minister Mikhail Bogdanov here in St. Petersburg at the International Economic Forum. And according to Bogdanov, Russia won't contribute to this conflict militarily and will do all it can using political and diplomatic means, while Vladimir Putin also spoke earlier to representatives of world news agencies. And according to Putin, it's necessary to ensure the right of Iran to peaceful energy and the right of Israel to get unconditional security. And he hinted, though, that he didn't say that directly, of course, but according to Putin, a peaceful formula for Iran and Israel could be that Russia will produce nuclear fuel for Iran's nuclear power plants. And just recently, we also heard from CEO of the state corporation Rosatom, Alexei Likhachov, and according to him, Rosatom is able to technically solve all the problems with enriched uranium in Iran, including high-grade uranium, if international agreements are reached, if they are in place, so Russia can go ahead as it has all the necessary expertise.
Okay, thank you very much, Yulia. Now let's get more now on the escalating conflict between Iran and Israel, because we have Adel Abdel Jafar, who's the director of the Foreign Policy Programme at the Middle East Council on Global Affairs. Thanks for coming back and talking to us. Focusing here now on Russia's role, what sort of role does it have, if any, when it comes to this? Because it has been making those phone calls with different leaders.
Yes, it has been making those phone calls. And as your reporter said previously, Iran and Russia signed this comprehensive strategic partnership earlier in the year to much fanfare. But despite the very impressive sounding name of this treaty, it does not include any mutual defense pact. So that's why Russia did not really come to the aid of Iran. Even some may argue that actually Russia benefits from this current war for a number of reasons. First of all, it bogs down the U.S. In conflict in the region. Second, it takes away the attention of the world.
How does that help them, though, if the U.S. is bogged down with the
Well,
region?
because it's not focused on Ukraine, so the attention of the world goes away from the Ukraine war. And finally, and perhaps more importantly, instability in the Middle East means that the oil prices are up. You know, the Russian economy is really hit hard, so higher oil prices is actually good for the Russian economy. Having said that, it's not in the long-term interest of Russia to lose another ally. If you recall, they lost Syria and Bashar al-Assad, and they didn't back him, and he's gone now. So I think they want to keep the Iranian regime and government in place and provide diplomatic support, offer some assistance. But beyond that, there's not really much. You know, if you can compare Russia's support to Iran to the U.S.'s support of Israel, is a completely different world, you know. And if you're an Iranian right now thinking, where are our friends and allies, where is Russia, where's China, it's very sad that they're not there, you know, but unfortunately it's a dog-eat-dog world.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much, Mr. Adel Abdel Jafar, for the thoughts. Israeli forces have again targeted Palestinians desperately waiting for food in central Gaza. At least 16 people were killed and dozens more injured near the Netzarim corridor On Wednesday, at least 29 Palestinians waiting for food were shot dead in Khan Yunis. These attacks took place at distribution points operated by the US and Israeli-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. Now, in other deadly Israeli airstrikes, at least 13 people were killed and dozens injured in al-Shati refugee camp. The strike targeted a makeshift tent that Palestinians were using to charge their mobile devices. This attack brings the death toll to 47 killed across Gaza since dawn on Thursday. Tariq Abu Azoum is in Deir al-Balah with more on the Israeli strikes targeting aid seekers.
This started to seem a daily routine right now in Gaza in light of the Israeli repeated attacks on aid seekers across all designated distribution centers across the Gaza Strip. This morning, we have woken up on the very horrific news of at least 16 Palestinians being killed and over 100 others reported wounded near a distribution center operated by the controversial Gaza Humanitarian Foundation just in Netzarim corridor. It's a very close place to where we are. These sounds of attacks was visibly and clearly very heard for everyone as the eyewitnesses confirmed that, as always, the Israeli military did not release any sort of warning for the hungry crowds that have gathered near that distribution point, according to an announcement that was shared by Gaza Humanitarian Foundation in its social media platforms, urging Palestinians to visit these sites in order to get food boxes. And many of viewers might wonder why people continue to go there despite the huge risk they are enduring. The answer is quite simple. Over more than 3 months of full closure of all border crossings has turned Gaza into a hunger point where people have run out of all kinds of humanitarian supplies and now found themselves to be forced to move to these designated centers to get bags of flour, bottle of water, and alongside also with food boxes that, according to nutritional experts, they said that it contains, and they contain some sort of low nutritional value. So apparently these attacks are still unfolding, turning all humanitarian corridors into killing grounds, and till now people are still waiting for the next announcement to go, simply because they have run out of all kinds of options, and UN-led agencies are still struggling to allow for more aid to access Gaza in light of the wider scale restrictions imposed on their work on the ground by the Israeli authorities.
Right, let's return to our top story now, where the conflict between Israel and Iran is ongoing. And we have Al Jazeera's Ali Hashim joining us live now from the Iraqi capital, Baghdad. Ali, we're getting reports of a warning from Iraq's Shia leader Ali Sistani against any US aggression against Iran. What more do we know?
Well, this was a statement, and this is the second time the statement is being issued by the highest Shia religious body, which is represented by Ayatollah Ali Sistani here in Najaf. This statement mainly condemned the Israeli attack on Iran, but the main point and the main line here is that it warned of the consequences of harming the leadership of Iran. We know the supreme leader of Iran, besides being a leader of a country, a political leader, he is a religious authority, and he's alongside with Ayatollah Sistani, they are the most senior religious leaders of the Shiite Muslim sect in the world. So what Sistani said in this statement is that there's going to be a chaos in case there's any harm to this leadership. And actually, if we want to analyze these words, it's mainly directed towards the United States before anyone, and that he is not going to be able to control the situation anymore in such circumstances. We know in Iraq there are factions that are allied with Iran, and Sistani played a big role over the past months in containing the impact of the war in the region and trying as much as possible to limit its influence on Iraq. So what he is saying here is that he won't be able to do anything in case Ayatollah Ali Khamenei or the leadership, mainly Khamenei, is harmed, especially that we are hearing right now a lot of threats to the life of Khamenei. And Ayatollah in general, at least from Sistani's position, is a position that needs to be preserved. And this keeps the power of the religious figure here. Over even in 1963, just like a historical background, Ayatollah Khomeini was sentenced to death, but because he was an Ayatollah, he was a marja, then the Shah had to exile him and not to execute him. So these are precedents that they take into consideration, and they warn that these issues should not be done.
And Ali, where does this take us next?
Well, it's clear we are in front of a moment of truth. So Iran, for now, is dealing with the situation in a way, whereas it is retaliating militarily. However, it's still keeping a distance from taking decisions that could commit it to certain policies in case this war comes to an end. For example, there are issues that Iran threatened to do in case its nuclear sites are being hit. For example, exiting the Non-Proliferation Treaty, NPT, and it did not yet exit it. Closing the Hormuz Strait, which is a vital strait and allows 20% of the world's oil to pass. And till the moment, Iran did not take such a move. So what we are seeing is that Iran is keeping these options, these cards aside, while focusing on the war. The other issue is that, and as we've been hearing, that the idea of toppling the head of the establishment in Tehran, Ayatollah Khamenei, as if this is going to topple the whole system, this doesn't seem to be an issue that's going to happen, because for now what we understood is that given what happened on the first day when the replacements of the military commanders were done quickly in few hours, also there are measures in place in case Ayatollah Khamenei is being targeted. There's a procedure, there are measures in place, whereas there is going to be a very swift transition towards someone else who is going to be elected by the Assembly of Experts. These are measures that these are orders that were already given, and it's clear that the Iranians are trying as much as possible to avoid any kind of vacuum on the top of their leadership, because the main issue here is that to keep the command and control intact.
Okay, thank you very much. Ali Hashim there reporting for us from Baghdad. Just to remind you of our stories, top stories here. The biggest hospital in southern Israel has been badly damaged in an Iranian missile attack. We'll be bringing you more of all of that later. That's it from me, Sarah Khairat, at least for this news hour. But you can find much more information on our website that is being kept up to date. The address is www.aljazeera.com. Marlene Saeed will be here with you in any moment now.